Disney's live-action remake of Snow White is hitting theaters this weekend, which means we're only a few weeks away from Disney's announcement of its animated remake of its live-action remake of Snow White. This video is brought to you by Green Chef. Go to greenchef.com/DanFree and use code DanFree for a special offer, and stay tuned after the video for more info. Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with my review for Snow White, which does finally hit theaters this weekend. It seems like this movie has been on the cusp of coming out for a long time, and really it has. This movie was announced over 8 years ago. It was shot in 2022, and between then and now, it seems like it has been mired in just about every online controversy you could possibly think of, from politics to statements about the original film, to the casting choices, to dwarf discourse. Quite frankly, I think that Disney is just going to be happy to get this one behind them. But the only thing that's important to this review is a very simple question: is the movie any good? Now, to add a little context as far as where I'm coming from, the only two modern live-action remakes, meaning in the last 10 years or so, that I thought really added anything to the original were Cinderella and The Jungle Book. Aladdin and The Little Mermaid, I thought were decent enough. I thought they added some okay stuff to the originals, and everything else that's been a live-action remake for me has been mediocre or I've been pretty negative on. So I'm not a huge fan of this trend, and to be honest, this movie didn't do a whole lot for me either. Rachel Zegler takes over as Snow White, and to be quite frank, I don't really care that she's not white. The movie explains why she's named Snow White in the first 2 minutes, and I never really gave it a second thought after that. Some people have literally spent years obsessing over this, but for me, the movie's 10-second explanation was perfectly fine, and honestly, there was a lot more at this movie that I thought was much more worth thinking about. Now, Disney's previous live-action remakes have generally been either largely shot-for-shot recreations of the animated films or reimaginings of the original films with some of the existing elements folded in. And it seems like when it was time to do Snow White, Disney decided, why not both? This version is a mashup of recreating iconic and popular sequences from the 1937 original and a completely new take where Snow White seeks to fulfill her destiny and wrest power from the evil queen, played by Gal Gadot. In reality, I think that you could cut the recreated sequences from the first film out of this movie entirely, and it would not change the story at all. You can almost hear the Disney machinery clinking behind the movie where they're thinking, okay, well, we can't leave the original stuff out entirely because that's going to make the purists angry, but there's not really enough there for us to remake the original because it's a very short film, so we've got to come up with a solution. And the solution they came up with, I think, is a mishmash that is tough to track at times. For example, a couple of years ago, some pictures resurfaced of a group of 7 actors whom people believed were the new 7 dwarfs. One of them was a dwarf and the rest were not. But that seemed to be debunked when Disney released pictures of Snow White with the dwarves, who now, in this version of the film, live in the Uncanny Valley. But those 7 actors are in this film. They're a group of 7 bandits who become allies of Snow White alongside the 7 dwarves, but there's still an actual real human dwarf that's in the real actor group who coexists alongside the CGI dwarves, and they share scenes, but it's never really referenced at all. I really don't know why this choice was made because neither group really has much impact on the outcome of the film, but to me, it's emblematic of the entire approach that Disney seemed to take here, which was a complete inability to figure out what approach they wanted to take. There is a lot of reimagining when it comes to the structure of the film. It's packed with new songs by Benj Pasek and Justin Paul, the songwriters behind Dear Evan Hansen and The Greatest Showman. Now, if you remember that I notoriously reviewed The Greatest Showman negatively when it came out, to much blowback from people that did see the movie later on, then it probably won't be much of a surprise that more than anything, it seemed to me like Disney had reimagined the classic animated film as a mediocre Broadway musical, but that's just because I don't really respond to the particular musical style of this songwriting duo. As with The Greatest Showman, your mileage very much may vary with the original songs. Now, what does work in favor of the film is that they have a star in Rachel Zegler, who is an accomplished musical actress, and she does sing her songs very well. She's very talented. I didn't love her performance As Snow White, I think it felt very broad even when it didn't need to be, but it was okay. I'm not a Rachel Zegler hater. I thought that she should have been nominated for Best Actress for her work in West Side Story, but I think that the overall kind of directionless take on this movie led to the starstruck theater kid type performance that we've seen in other Disney projects in the past, and I don't think that it particularly served the actress or the movie that well. Gal Gadot as the evil queen wasn't a total disaster, but I just don't think that she was the best person for this role. She has evil and menacing down, but Disney villains also require that hint of wickedness, the relishing of the moment, going just over the top enough that it's fun to watch. It's this role, and not Snow White, where I think you needed a little bit more theatricality, where you needed to go a little more broad. Angelina Jolie, for example, I think did this brilliantly in her villainous scenes in the first Maleficent film and in a few scenes in the follow-up, but Gal Gadot doesn't really take advantage of that Disney villain role, even in her big new villain song, nor does she really transform as the old woman in disguise. This really felt more like casting a name in the role than finding the actor that would be the best fit for the part. One key expanded role is Jonathan, played by Andrew Burnap, a bandit who basically takes the place of the prince from the original story. It's he who brings the 7 apparently not dwarves, except there's still one dwarf, into the story, and he's fine. He and Zegler have decent chemistry in what is a very stereotypically Disney romance. If the movie had committed to his story and the newness of this direction a little bit more, then I think I might have liked him more, but here he's forced to share space with all of the nostalgic elements, and because he's a new character, that means that he basically disappears for long stretches of the movie. When it comes to the look of the film, director Mark Webb, in his most high-profile film since The Amazing Spider-Man 2 back in 2014, does bring some flair to a few of the sequences in the movie. I particularly thought that Snow White's journey through the dark forest was a nicely stylized rendition of the original sequence, and I think that he directs the musical numbers well, but this mostly feels like a job for hire, and I didn't detect a whole lot of personal style behind the film. I understand that polarization is the name of the game right now, and that people expect you to be either on the love or the hate side of this. But really, I think that some people will probably like this movie just fine. There are cute animals, there are cute dwarves, there are cute jokes, and there's a generally positive story about finding your destiny. Those are all Disney standbys. I don't know how well it's going to hold the attention of younger audiences, particularly in the second half, and I think that that is a key group that Disney is going to have to win over on this one. For fans of the original, I think it's a double-edged sword. The parts of the animated film that are included are stylishly rendered, but utterly inconsequential to the overall story. Snow White and the Poison Apple, for example, which was the key climactic event in the original film, is little more than a bump in the road here. If you're just going to see how well those sequences are brought into the real world, into live action, then you might like it, though I think it'll largely depend on how creepy you find the CGI dwarves, which for me, the answer was very, very creepy. If you're one of those people that's looking for Disney to depart from the rote recreations of their original animated films, again, there's some stuff for you here. There are a bunch of new songs, there are big musical sequences, there's sort of a new mission for Snow White to accomplish, but the big question here is, will that be enough? Is any of the new stuff groundbreaking enough to justify basically sitting through half of a movie that you've already seen before? Maybe there will be enough there to win over parts of both groups, but the movie just didn't do a whole lot to win me over. This is another one of those no-win scenario movies where critics who liked it and critics who didn't like it are going to be labeled one way or the other, which I think is really unfair to any critic who's reviewing the film in good faith, regardless of their opinion. But for me, this is a muddled, confusing, puzzling film that is yet another example of Disney's overall lack of creative direction, or really any idea of what its various divisions actually want to be doing. Walt Disney really revolutionized filmmaking back in 1937 with the original Snow White, which was bold and risky and confident in its mission to bring a new kind of filmmaking to the masses. Here we are almost 90 years later, and the current iteration of the company that bears his name is really showing me the opposite of that. So when we look at where I'm rating Snow White on my personal scale, I'm putting it at not a fan, and only because I don't think it's an absolute catastrophe. There are some production elements like cinematography, costume design, and some sequences that I think do work, especially in isolation. But overall, this was another misfire for me when it comes to live action remakes, which, as I said at the top, I don't really love anyway, but what do you think? Are you going to be heading out to see Snow White this weekend? Let me know down in the comments below. And before we go, I want to thank the sponsor for this review, Green Chef. Look, we're all looking to eat better, unless you're that rare person who can thrive on 4 pizzas a week, in which case I envy and salute you. But why stick to those short-lived fads when you can create new, healthy habits that last with Green Chef? Green Chef is the #1 meal kit for clean eating with pre-portioned and prepped quality food sent right to your door. I'm talking fresh produce, reasonably sourced proteins, and recipes designed by chefs to make you want to keep eating great. Plus, Green Chef has recipes curated for a variety of lifestyles and dietary needs. And this isn't just a box of stuff thrown together. The sauces are pre-made, the ingredients are pre-portioned, and your prep and mess are kept to a minimum so you can get to the best part, eating. My first box is arriving this week, and I'm super excited to try what's on the menu. Plus, I know that even though I'm a dummy when it comes to cooking, even I'll be able to follow the recipes with all the ingredients laid out for me. And if you don't have time to prep, that's not a problem. Green Chef also has salads that you can make in 5 minutes, smoothies ready to blend, and protein-filled breakfasts that you can grab and go. Thrive all year with clean, easy meals from Green Chef. Go to greenchef.com/danfree and use code DANFREE to get started with free salads for 2 months plus 50% off your first box. That's free salads for 2 months plus 50% off your first box at greenchef.com/danfree with the code DANFREE. Kick off your new meal plan today with Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. Thanks to Green Chef for sponsoring this review, and thank you for watching. Be sure to stay tuned right here for more movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Until next time, stay safe, be nice to each other, and I'll see you next time. Bye.